Our textbook, Society, the Classroom, and Instructional Practices, has a section on flexible instruction, which is basically the idea that um, the one-size-fits-all umbrella it's not really the appropriate way to go about teaching a lesson. And this is something that I forgot in fourth period. Um, I had practiced the lesson with different adaptations for ELD students, and I had modified the lesson. So I had essentially taught two different lessons in the first two periods. By the third period, I had integrated what I thought to be a good, effective lesson. So I came into period 4 feeling kind of confident and cocky in my ability to present the material to the students. And I was brought down to reality really, really quick because I realized that I hadn't made the lesson flexible or hadn't adapted it for my fourth period. So the lesson, the direction of the lesson was very similar to the third period lesson. Group work at the beginning, instruction in the middle, direct instruction in the middle with cooperation from the students, and then group work at the end. And simply put, this did not work for fourth period. The students were completely off task. Even if, as I walked around the classroom and engaged them, they were having conversations about what they were going to do during lunch, what was going to happen after school. And when I tap on their desk and I said, what are we doing? Let's stay on task. They either brushed me off or they gave me a complacent okay, took a note or two, and as I walked away, they were going back to their initial discussion. I tried using the warm demander method, and in fourth period, it didn't go over as smoothly as it did in third period. I don't know if there isn't the environment in fourth period for it. There probably isn't. In discussing it with my master teacher later on, he mentioned to me that there were a few students who had been put back into world history. I think there's 3 or 4 seniors and 3 or 2 juniors. And but overall, the warm demander method was not effective, at least in fourth period. So students didn't cooperate and they were not engaged. And overall, the work that I collected at the end wasn't indicative of any really learning or critical thinking going on. So some of the observations I had, students really had to be pushed for answers, and I don't think that students fully understood the content that was being presented to them. And I was foolish in thinking that I could just apply that cookie cutter approach that I thought I had refined by third period. And maybe it was my fault because in thinking about it and talking to my master teacher, there are some things that I should have and will hopefully do better next time. So one thing I need to look at is stop and reassess why students are behaving in this manner. And I think by this time I was so comfortable in the content that I forgot to relate the content to students' lives. In the first few periods, I had asked for people to raise their hand and describe who they think Gandhi was like, and some of them raised their hand and said Martin Luther King, and then some students discuss Cesar Chavez as being influenced by Gandhi. So then I asked questions about how long had people's parents been here, and I described my own story, my grandpa's story, and his father being in the Bracero program, and how Cesar Chavez's life, or what he did for the Chicanos in Southern California really affected my family at least. So I think that was a good hooker for the first 3 periods. It was a good way to hook the students and engage them in the conversation on Gandhi. However, in fourth period, I didn't really go in too much into detail on that because I wanted to my thought was to give more time for students at the end to finish their assignment. And maybe it was the fact that I didn't engage them at first, but they really weren't hooked at the beginning, and I think that progressed and was the case throughout the entire lesson plan. So also, my master teacher recommended that for fourth period, what he does is he puts students into groups of 2 or pairs versus groups of 4. He says that his fourth period class, they love to chit chat, they love to talk amongst themselves, and he didn't recommend doing that, he said, because he wanted it to be a learning experience for me. He wanted me to see um, that sometimes group work is not as effective as it is in other classes, that we have to adapt our lesson plans and figure out a way to reach these students. And he said it's been his experience that when he puts students into pairs and he's much more structured in the instruction that he gives the students, that they respond appropriately. So, lesson learned for me. Um, I can't get too comfortable to the point where I'm not relating to my students and I'm just engaging them. So, period 4 was definitely a learning experience for me.